The question is whether you can build unmanned torpedo planes that can fly low over the water and have its radar signature blend in with the signature of the ocean. If a torpedo plane is flying low to the ocean, the radar on destroyers and warships is actually looking down at it. It's going to be looking down into the actual reflection from the waves. The waves of the ocean are very noisy. They create a lot of random movement. The radar has to have some kind of noise rejection standard. In the old days, that would be an analog system of trying to reject high levels of noise to signal ratio. In modern days, that can be an entire processor using digital forms such as fast Fourier transforms. The design would be to have an aircraft of an irregular shape and form. It doesn't have regular smooth panels to get a uniform radar return, and to try to make it look more like the random return from ocean waves. That can be further enhanced by paint. If there is paint applied that has different levels of radar reflectivity, for instance, you can add aluminum powder to the paint to increase its radar reflectivity. And if the paint is applied in a semi-random pattern, again, you're getting a random looking pattern on the radar. What that would then produce is a high radar return stealth aircraft. The radar is getting the return from the aircraft, but it's actually rejecting it as a signal. It is in fact ignoring it. Back in the 1930s, there was a radio drama called The Shadow. And The Shadow, Ned Lamont, supposedly in the Far East, learned the secret of confusing men's minds so that he could stand in the room in front of someone and the person would not see him. That's basically what this radar is trying to do. It's getting the return. It's actually physically seeing it in terms of getting the return from the aircraft, but then it is interpreting it as though there's nothing there because of the noise signal, because its noise matches the noise of ocean waves. The planes would have perhaps 2 torpedoes each. They would take off, they would fly to perhaps 100 feet over the ocean. They would use a laser altimeter. The laser doesn't produce any radio signals. Obviously, you want to have the lowest power laser altimeter you can develop to minimize the laser light being seen. The aircraft would start off 100 feet over the ocean, and then it would fly down slowly closer and closer to the ocean until they're 5 or 10 feet above the crest of the waves. The engines would be mounted on the underside at the back of the aircraft. There would be panels on the sides of the engine to obscure the front from being seen and producing a radar return. At the back of the engines, the horizontal stabilizers would curve down to form vertical stabilizers to cover part of the aft end of the engine. There would also be a ledge that extends out over the top of the exhaust of the engines to again obscure the view of them. So you can't get a radar return from them over most angles, and also to obscure the thermal signature of it. There are still hot gases coming out of the engine which might be identifiable. One problem with this design, of course, is that as you're skimming over the ocean, your engines are ingesting seawater. That is not good for an engine. The salt does not do anything good for the engine, and you may have to frequently replace the engines. They would fly perhaps in groups of 3. If one of them sees an enemy ship, you'd have some kind of camera arrangement on the front of the torpedo planes. That is to avoid flying into waves that may be uneven in height, and it's also to look for the targets. When one of them physically sees the target, it would turn towards the target and release 2 torpedoes. The other 2 aircraft would turn away from the target. What they would be trying to use is the curvature of the Earth. At sea, the square root of feet in height above the water equals the distance in nautical miles approximately to the horizon. So if you're 64 feet above the water surface, the horizon will appear to be about 8 nautical miles away. If they're beyond that distance and staying low to the surface, the radar cannot directly see them. There may still be backscattering, there may still be some kind of a signal, but at least you're not getting a clean observation of the aircraft with the radar. The torpedo plane that sees the ship would, of course, also be seen by the ship. This is one reason why you want it to have a stealthy form, so it can at least survive long enough to drop its torpedoes and signal the other 2 planes to begin their attack. So the 2 other aircraft would turn away, try to stay below the horizon line, and fly in parallel to the ship, one to the left and one to the right. They would each drop 1 torpedo short of the ship and 1 torpedo in front of the ship. Whichever way the ship turns, there should be a torpedo ready to attack it. The first aircraft drops its 2 torpedoes. They would split off a little bit to the left and the right. Again, if the ship turns, one of them is in a better attack position. If a ship is running at 35 knots and a torpedo is traveling at 50 knots, if the torpedo is dropped 15 miles away from the ship, it would take the torpedo 1 hour to catch up with the ship, and it would need a range of 50 nautical miles. Torpedoes don't have a range of 50 nautical miles. You can build a bigger, clunkier torpedo, but they're kind of awkward. The point of dropping the torpedoes all around the ship is that if it runs away from one torpedo, it's physically running into another torpedo. One of them should be able to successfully attack the ship. If there is something like a carrier task force, groups of these aircraft could be sent in to attack in a ring formation. They would fly in, form a rough circular pattern, and they would each drop torpedoes that would travel in towards the task force. The torpedoes would opportunistically attack whatever ship is available, trying to reduce the screen. You could then follow that up with a second ring of aircraft coming in even closer and slowly reducing the ring of protection and eventually attacking the aircraft carrier or whatever ships are being protected. The other factor is the Doppler shift. When an object is moving towards an object or away from an object, there is a Doppler shift in the signal on the radar. Because this thing is producing a significant radar return, there will be a Doppler shift registering on the radar that will tell the radar operators that there's something out there. The question is, can it identify it close enough that it can be targeted and destroyed? Ocean waves also have a Doppler shift. Ocean wavelengths and speeds are functions of the length of the waves. A 14-second wave travels at about 45 miles per hour and has a length of about 1,000 feet. That's a pretty big wave. A 20-second wave, which is a huge wave, those are waves only generated by major storms. They have a speed of over 65 miles per hour and a length of 2,000 feet. Now you're looking at an object that's traveling at 300 miles per hour. So that's significantly above the Doppler shift of the waves. So that should tell the radar that something's out there. But if it can't correlate it with a specific target, the radar may still reject it. Again, for this to work, it has to do with the signal processing of the radar units. So I'm not sure if this would really work or not. The radar system has to have a strong signal rejection or it's going to be flooded with noise from the ocean. And you're trying to slot it in so that its noise rejection system rejects this signal from the aircraft as ocean noise as well. Torpedoes are going to strike the water at well over 200 miles per hour. You can put a small parachute in back of them to slow them down a little bit, but there's still going to be a very high energy impact with the water, which means there's going to be a cap of some form, like a dunce cap, over the front end of the torpedo to protect the sonar from being damaged with the impact. And then when it enters the water, that cap would separate. The other factor, of course, is making the body of the aircraft uneven does increase aerodynamic drag. But if it works, you can probably live with it.